to talk about your settings because that was what really struck me about your debut. I mean, it was a medieval English historical, and those aren't, I mean, they're not certainly not as plentiful as they used to be.
Correct, yeah.
You know, but, you know, England is a fairly common setting in romance novel land. But the whole Robin Hood thing and the types of characters you had were so interesting, and now you're going to Spain. And I'm wondering, was this a conscious decision on your part to do something unusual? Did it just sort of happen? I mean, were you just kind of tooling along, writing a nice little Regency romp, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, this idea popped out of thin air? Or has it always been a conscious decision to go sort of the different end of the spectrum?
My master's was in American history. I did a thesis on Jesse James and Wild Bill Hickok, so I was definitely an Old West girl. And then it's like I come out of this 10-year trance where I was all about the Old West and looked around and saw there's so much more history to do that I had, you know, I got my degree, but I felt like I didn't have a good grounding in European history or Asian history. And so the first one I picked, kind of fascinating, I was getting into classical music, and I started to study Mozart, and that's why I wrote my first manuscript, was set in Salzburg, in Napoleonic Salzburg. And it didn't find a home because primarily Austria, not an easy sell. It's available now on my website for free. I've serialized it, and it's available free for download, so people can get a sense of what I would write if I wrote a mannerly, kind of quiet, emotional story. I got to the end of that and needed some explosions and sword fights and big action. I wanted to go Indiana Jones and Robin Hood, but then it was just kind of the sky's the limit. I wanted to see, it's an excuse for me to research things I otherwise would have not been able to.
Yeah.
I want to learn about Spain, so let's set a story there. It's very ulterior motives, but yeah, and with the Nottingham setting, I think everybody knows kind of, they know the word Nottingham. Yeah. They don't necessarily even know where it is in England. It's kind of in the north with the forests.
Yeah.
But I wanted to learn more about the region and some of the culture. At the time, it was very divided, Norman and Saxon. I don't necessarily get into it in the book because of the recovering historian part of me. It's like, this doesn't have a place right now. But I was just fascinated to learn that this time period, you know, it was set in 1199, had a lot of potential to go French, go, you know, to the Norman side, go to the Saxon side. Loyalties were divided based on class, and these are the sorts of things I had no idea about. So it became fascinating for me, and then, like I said, I had to put all of that kind of in a box. So that was nice to learn, and then continue with the story as it needed to be told. And some of that bleeds over with some of the characters I chose to include. Jacob is a young Jewish boy that I have in Scoundrel and in Scoundrel's Kiss. And Jews were very prevalent in the north of England, in York especially, and in Spain, huge influence in Spain. So I felt that it was a perfect opportunity to try and just let people know that this was a sort of person that would have been living at that time, even though the Nottingham aspect is very mythical. Yeah. The England that I tried to set it in is this kind of a little balance between the mythical and the actual, you know, because of what England was in the 12th century.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's what's so fascinating, especially if you're using the Robin Hood legend as a jumping off point for these two books. A lot of it is legend because so many stories have been passed down and they're different versions, and you know, there's so many places you can go with it. I
like to say that there might have been a person named Robin Hood. That's all we know.
Yeah.
It could have been a nickname for a type of criminal. It could have been a real person, but the name shows up in the historic record over several hundred years. So there was no one individual that we can identify as saying this is Robin Hood, and that's where legend comes in, and it builds on the national character. The thesis I did for Jesse James and Wild Bill Hickok, same thing. It reflects aspects of Americana. Robin Hood reflects aspects of what it is to be English, and kind of continues on that. And so I used aspects of the Robin Hood legends. I opened each chapter with a quote from some of the old ballads and works, and really tried to kind of pick up certain themes like test of loyalty and confronting a stranger in the woods. These are things you see over and over and over in the Robin Hood legends, and I really tried to bring them into What a Scoundrel Wants deliberately to kind of keep that book in keeping with the legend and the kind of string of stories that have come out of it.